G'day and thanks for watching. Today's a little bit different. Normally I don't do teardown videos because tearing something down isn't all that exciting most of the time. But a friend of mine brought in a Taylor and Hobson angular table. Now I'm not quite sure of the age of this. I think it's somewhere around about the 50s, and that's probably a reasonable thing to aim for. I guess the reason I say that is that it looks like it's reasonably well made, but it doesn't look like it's been used or has had CNC on it. It hasn't got any plastic parts. So when you think that CNC and plastics, injection molded plastics, took off probably around about 1950, 1960 in there, it's probably just the tail end of that. Back then the guys doing the castings really knew their stuff, because if you wanted a mass-produced shape, casting was basically it. So lots of practice, and they got really good at it. I saw this particular fixture about 20 minutes after my friend had bought it, much to my chagrin, and so he said, well, you can borrow it and measure it up if you like and see what you can do. So I'm going to measure it up, make a casting, and or make some castings, and then see if I can replicate it. Now, one of the things that I need to do, of course, is take it apart, and I started taking it apart, and there were some really interesting little design features in there. So I thought, well, I'll document that. Documenting is useful because not only does it help you put things back together again if you know how did that go in, but it also can be of interest to other people. And there are certainly some design features here which, if someone had said to me, how would you do this, the solutions they've come up with are simple and elegant, but not necessarily what you'd first think of. And so from that point of view, it's quite an instructive little teardown, because there are all sorts of features in there, and it may be interesting to people, particularly if you do a little bit of design work, just to see how all these things go together. One thing you might just be able to make out here is a name, Taylor Hobson. What's that? Leicestershire, England, and there's a patent number. Now, I've actually been to the British Library to try and find out about that patent, and they haven't got a record of it. So whether it was one of those ones that was applied for and they never went through with it, or records have been lost, don't know. But as I was saying earlier, I think this is around about let's say 50 years old. Actually closer to 70 now, 60, 70 years old, and being made in England. There's a very good chance that these threads are Whitworth threads or British Standard Fine. And in fact, from measuring up, I can confirm that yes, they are. Now, that also helps because it means that a lot of these dimensions in here are probably some fraction of an inch, just because of where it came from. If this was from a metric country, you'd expect the dimensions to be some sort of multiple of whole millimeters, unless they didn't have to. So that also helps. And knowing that these threads and this thread and a few others are BS standard threads, it makes guessing what things are just that little bit easier. One of the first questions is, well, why is this so special? Well, it can adjust from that through to that. So what's that? 0 to 90 degrees. That's probably not quite 90, but the scale says 90, and I think it's just a matter of adjustment. It's also got the ability to turn that way, and then when you look at the back, there's a detent arrangement, which means that you can index, in this case these notches are 15 degrees apart, you can index in 15-degree increments. So if you're trying to put out a whole pattern or something regularly spaced, it's built in. It's nice and compact, and it's just a nice looking bit of kit. So to start with, I'm going to take off the detent arrangement here, and that'll help me just get in a bit. But that itself looks interesting because there's a flat spring in there, and that looks like that's all that's holding that to that pin. So if I take that off, yes. So that's probably the one of the first interesting little things. There's a flat spring that goes on there, and that flat spring is not only engaging on the flats here, but is also helping retain that part on there. So that's an interesting little feature. Okay, I'll take off this collar. Now unfortunately this collar's been broken, and so it'll need to be fixed, replaced, whatever. It's just a pretty normal split collar. However, there are a couple of pins on there, and when you look at the disc, those pins engage with the disc. They're conically shaped, which means that they're only really locking into position right at the end there, similar to diamond pins which tool makers use. But what that also means is that this disc could be swapped. This has got 15-degree increments, which means it's got 24 things on it. If you wanted to divide by 6, this is fine. If you wanted to divide by 5, you're stuck. So what you could do is make up another disc like this, only with 30 increments on it, and that way you've got the opportunity then to divide by 5, divide by 6, and if you want to divide by 4, you can take that disc off and put this disc on. And if you wanted to do something, I can't think of a multiple at the moment, 9 perhaps, if you wanted to divide by 9, you could put a 27 on there, all that sort of thing. Now that's not terribly thick stuff. That's only 5/16 or something like that. Says here pulling out a. So that's 3/16 plate. So it wouldn't be difficult to make those up. So that's another possibility. I'll just put a few things back together here. When doing a tear down like this, you need to try and keep yourself organised and make sure that you don't lose small parts, so put that there. Okay, so this is a threaded ring, and it's pinching on. Now I don't know, there you go. That looks like that's meant to be like that, but that's an interesting feature too. So to snug this up, you run the ring up there, and then you've got your disc, and then you've got your locking collar. So quite a simple way of doing things, and that'll all pull out. Now, putting that to one side for a moment. So that looks like it's a cast iron plate. T-slots in there for holding things on the top. That doesn't look like it's a tapered bore through there, but you could do that if you wanted to put a taper in there. 2-inch thread. So yeah, just a nice thing there. That looks like it's all one piece. Now I think when I go and recreate this, I'll probably just buy a slice of cast iron and then mount a spigot onto that made out of steel, because that thread and the work there is very fine, and I'm not quite sure whether modern cast iron would do that for me, as well as the fact that if you bought a lump of solid, you'd be taking away a lot of material there just to get down to that, and if you cast it, well, who knows what you'll get. Another interesting design feature here is the use of eccentrics. What they've done is they've got a pin with an eccentric centerpiece on it, and that actually runs into parts of the casting. And so, I was saying about not quite getting to 90 degrees and that possibly being an adjustment issue. That's the reason. There's a slot on the front there. Let's say slot on the front, and that enables you to move that pin position around a little bit and adjust your 0 point. I'm just going to pop those out. I think these are the retaining bolts, or retaining screws for those. Not quite sure. Interesting thing is that, there we go. interesting thing too is that the holes for these bolts are only just big enough for the socket I'm putting in here. So someone has thought about that bit too. So we can push these out. There we go. So that's the arrangement there, and you can see as I rotate that how the cam moves around. Pop the other one out as well. And you can see there's the step that cam would push against. While I'm at this end too, another interesting feature here is the shaft on the table here goes through here, and this is a clamping device for that. But rather interestingly, instead of having a cotter arrangement here or having a screw bearing directly on the shaft, what they've done is they actually put a hole through here. It's actually in the casting, it's feeling rough, and so this particular screw clamp pushes on the casting, and so that's doing the clamping. So I can actually undo that like so. There's the clamping part already in the casting, or still in the casting, and there's the clamping lever to do that. The way of locking the angle here had me foxed for a little bit. I had to stop and have a look at this. With the hex key, that's now locked up tight. Without the hex key, that can move. So what's in here? Well, take out the hex key, and there's a little screw just next to it, and take that out. And then you tip up. There we go. So that's what's clamping it. Is you'd call it, I guess, a loose T-bolt with 2 notches in it, and the second one here pushes there and pulls that up. The first one with this screw here, there's another little pin there. Let's see if I can get that to come out. There we go. So the first one with the screw goes in there and locks that in place. And then the second one with a big grub screw is the thing that actually does the clamping. That pulls that up. That looks like that's been hardened. It's got some beautiful coloration on it. But what it means is that T-slot there doesn't need anything much more than that to lock it. Now, another interesting thing here, the top of that has got a slight curve to it. And that's actually to match what's happening in here, because if you have a T-slot cutter and you run it round a circular path like that, as you can see, the bottom of the slot, is flattish. It's got a slight bit of convex to it, but the top of the slot has also got a bit of, well, in this case it's concave because it's that way. Okay, so if you just had a flat nut pulling on that wouldn't work. So they've actually sort of put a bit of a dome on that nut, which matches the slot there. And that also answers my question, how did they get that T-slot in there? I was wondering whether they had this mounted up somehow and used a lathe to do that with some funny offset cutters. And no, all they've done is they've used a T-slot cutter, put a curved nut in there, and away they go. And so that, to me, that's rather interesting, because I've been wondering how that sort of thing is done. I was going to try and take that pin out until I discovered how all this came out. I think it's been pushed in, but that's okay. So anyway, there are basically the 3 parts that need to be cast. The table, which I won't cast. I'll fabricate that out of some flat. The rotating table, I guess, and the base piece. Oh, one nice thing about the base piece too. This is the the marker, I guess, for the graduated scale on the side there, and that's actually a piece of brass. So rather than trying to engrave the cast iron, keep that clean, they've put a bit of brass in there with a mark on it. I guess that serves two purposes. It means that firstly, you don't have to be, you know, you can do all your machining and all that sort of thing for your table, and then come along and put your what would you call it, fiducial mark on there. That's just held on with a screw. But secondly, you've got a, you know, it's brass, you've got a bit of a contrast to the grey cast iron, so you can actually pick that out. So there we go. So anyway, that's the tear down of the Taylor Hobson angle fixture. All in all, it's a very neat design. So I hope that's been of interest, and we'll see you for the next one.